Hey guys, it's Julian McKenzie from the CJ Show. Just wanted to take a moment and let you know I have a book coming out. I can't believe it either. It's called Black Aces, Essential Stories from Hockey's Black Trailblazers. I had a whole bunch of conversations and interviews with notable Black hockey players and personalities. There's chapters on guys like Jarome Iginla, PK Subban, Sarah Nurse, Kevin Weeks, Anson Carter, Jacques Larac is in it too. Blake Bolden's in it. Grant Fuhr is in it as well. A lot of prominent names, a lot of prominent faces. Whether you've heard of them, when maybe you haven't heard of them, and if you're wondering, hey, what about Anthony Duclair, or what about some other player that I want mentioned in the book? If there's not a chapter on them, they're definitely mentioned in this book some way, somehow, because the point of this book is just to highlight so many good things when it comes to the history of Black hockey players and stars throughout the league, of the NHL, in the PWHL as well, in the NWHL when it was a thing, and also even the people before them. We're talking about your Willie O'Ree. You're talking about your Herb Carnegies as well. It's important to mention those figures, and I hope that this book does justice in some way. Comes out in February, specifically the date February 3rd, 2026. You can pre-order the book right now on Amazon, Indigo, and select bookstores in Canada and the United States. Get it in now. Get your orders in right now. So that way, when February 3rd, 2026 comes around, you'll already have your copy, or at least it'll be on the way. Black Aces, a book that I wrote, coming out in February 2026. Pre-order it right now.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, it's Monday, and we already know the first 6 players on a handful of international rosters for the upcoming Olympic Games in February. When we were literally, as you woke up on Monday, we saw the first 6 for teams like Sweden. Switzerland is up there. Czechia is up there as well. There's a lot we can get to. As of now, we haven't seen for Canada and Team USA, but I'd love to know, Finland is also part of this list as well. I'd love to know your first thoughts and impressions on some of the first 6s you've seen for some of the different teams mentioned so far.
Well, I mean, it's exciting, right? This is the run to Milan for men's hockey is officially on. And, you know, having these first 6 players nominated is a chance, I think, to start putting some attention on the tournament. Obviously, for the individual countries, it's their leadership groups, essentially. You know, you're establishing your best players, your locks already. You know, for the players themselves, I'm sure there's some relief. I mean, there's not necessarily a whole heap of surprises here. But, you know, if you're Lucas Raymond, for example, for Sweden, it's probably nice to know this morning, 100% you're on the team and there's no questions going into next season, because the countries have until December 31st to fill out the rest of their roster. So, you know, that's a fair bit of runway on the start of next season. And, you know, obviously for some of the deeper countries, the top 6 in the world, say, you know, there's going to be some choices down the roster, and how you perform, how players perform that are on that bubble early next year will probably dictate how things go. So, you know, from a high level, I think it's pretty cool that we're on our way there. You know, Sweden's first 6 jumped out at me mostly because, you know, a year ago at this time, each of the countries that participated in the Four Nations picked their first 6. Sweden had 4 different choices from a year ago in its first 6. So gone are no Erik Karlsson this time around, no Gustav Forsling, no Philip Forsberg, no Mika Zibanejad. And so inside a year, that's a pretty big change. Now, you know, Sweden had the weird experience of the Four Nations. They didn't lose in regulation, but obviously didn't really sniff getting to the championship game because, you know, they were dropping games in overtime. But, you know, I think couple that with, you know, it's a world championship. They got a bronze on home ice, but, you know, probably some disappointment not playing in that gold medal game for them. And it's just also just shifting, you know, tectonic plates, man. Like, time stops for no country, for no person, for no national team. And so you're getting quite a different looking Swedish 6 to begin with. And I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, like Kempe's, Lucas Raymond, help me with the rest of the list, because there's a lot of news this morning.
Oh, for sure. Don't worry. What I was going to do is, we don't have to go through every single team, but for some of the bigger ones mentioned so far, like Sweden has William Nylander, Adrian Kempe, Victor Hedman, Mason Raymond, Rasmus Dahlin, and Gabe Landeskog, who I wanted to get to.
Pay the fine! Mason Raymond! Wow.
What's wrong with Mason Raymond? He's a good player in Detroit. I'm more surprised that Gabe Landeskog is. I mean, look, we all know how great of a player. What do you got against Mason Raymond?
Your brain is short. It's Lucas Raymond. Your brain is short circuiting.
It is short circuiting. Oh God! I only realized that. Oh God! I gotta take a lap. Jesus Lord! Oh,
I love it,
man.
Mason Raymond.
No.
That's a
I
deep
meant Lucas.
cut.
I meant Lucas. Lucas. Oh God! And the worst part about it is,
but he retired like 10 years ago.
The worst part about it is that I said his name for a solid like 30 seconds, and it was just like I didn't realize.
That's why I was like, pay the fine because you misspoke.
Lucas Raymond.
Anyway, honestly, that was hilarious. Like that, you made my morning already. So,
William Nylander, Adrian Kempe, Victor Hedman, Rasmus Dahlin, Lucas Raymond, and Gabriel Landeskog are among the first 6 for Team Sweden. Now we can continue.
I was just saying, how do I miss Gabe? You know, Gabriel Landeskog gets back in the playoffs. You know, I will say this. I would expect, and they've moved the C around in Sweden a fair bit. Like, you know, Carlson, I think, wore it a couple years ago at the World Championship. Hedman wore it. And so those guys might still, but I think it wouldn't surprise me if Gabriel Landeskog is the captain of Team Sweden. Obviously, I'm projecting good health, a great season for him, that he's going to be fine after that knee issue. But he's such an important player on a national team level for Sweden and obviously the Colorado Avalanche. So it was pretty, like, I think it's interesting they put him on there, but I do think it's because he's in the leadership group. Like, he's a culture guy for them. Obviously, no one knows what's going to happen with his health. You know, there's going to be the ability to replace players that get injured during the season. Unfortunately, it's probably going to happen with some names. I don't necessarily mean even just from the 6. But yeah, it's, I mean, I can't wait to see what Mason Raymond looks like on the Swedish team, though.
Oh man, sorry. I the only thing I was going to follow up with that is obviously watching the World Championship and seeing Rasmus Andersson get the C. I wonder if he gets named after and if he gets an A or what have you on the defense core. Obviously, that's projecting a little bit more, but well, I can also understand if Mason Raymond broke your concentration. I mean, I don't have much concentration to begin with. Our 100%ers know that. We go in all sorts of directions, but you know, add in like all this cross-continent travel that it's the end of June. I'm all over the place, but look at, they've left their options open on D, right? Like, not only do they not name Rasmus Andersson, they don't name Gustav Forsling, who might just be days away here from lifting the cup for 2 second straight year. You know, the Swedish, probably the most interesting decisions when it comes to the December 31st deadline for Sweden will be on the blue line, because I do think they have more good players than they have roster spots. And so, you know, obviously I don't think it's a big stretch to promise one of those spots to Victor Hedman, and the other to Rasmus Dahlin. Like, not a lot of surprise there, but beyond those two, they've given themselves some optionality here to figure out how things go. And so, you know, this is another storyline. This is why I'm so glad Best on Best is back, to be honest. You know, Victor Hedman was a controversial pick who was left off the 2014 Olympic team. The last time there was Best on Best, he didn't know if he'd ever get there, right? The 2 Olympics since then didn't include NHL players, but now he knows for sure, you know, the Tampa Bay Lightning captain, that he's going to be getting to represent his country at the Olympics. And I can tell you, without having spoken to him, but I know he'll be very excited about that. Over the years, I've had a chance to talk about what a motivating situation that was when they left him off for Sochi. It was it was a puzzling decision at the time. It was not well received. It was right as his career was taking flight. You know, remember, he went to the Cup final with Tampa in 2015. Hasn't really looked back in over a decade, but you know, this is what's cool for all these guys. You know, I had a chat with Brad Marchand the other day too. Like, he feels like he missed 2 Olympics, right? Like, he played for Canada for the first time in Best on Best at the 2016 World Cup, 2018 Olympics, 22 Olympics, bam. And so those were, you know, he feels, and I think rightly so, that those were taken away from him, that he would have been a Team Canada player in that situation. And now, even though he's having this awesome moment in the playoffs, and I'm sure we'll get to that when we get talking about the Cup final and even free agency. I mean, he ticks all boxes today. You know, I don't think Brad Marchand will be among Canada's 6 skaters named to the Olympic team now, simply because of age. And look, he's had a season here where he's had a bunch of surgeries last summer, you know, missed some time in season with an injury. I just think they're going to want to see where he's at come December before making that call. I mean, certainly very much in the mix to make the team,
but it's not promised to him. And, I'll say this too. One thing Marchand told me is when this cup is won, which obviously could be Tuesday night or at latest Friday, and he, hopes to be on the winning side, but I suppose there's still a time in the world he's not. However it shakes out, he does not plan to take much time off from skating or training because he's so motivated to want a shot at that Olympic team. And, it's obviously a big summer for him too. He's likely going to free agency, likely ending up in a new city. It's also coming off that summer last year where I mentioned he had 3 different surgeries. He didn't get a chance to train properly. So this is a huge summer for him on a number of fronts. And, that tells you what this means, I guess, is kind of what I'm getting at here. Like I had a friend overseas text me. He's like, do people care about these 6 player announcements? And I was like, I'd say it seems to me there's probably mild interest into who gets named there, but like the players care for sure. And I think it's going to be an awesome Olympic tournament once it gets around to next February. We're just, it's hard to imagine it right now if you're somewhere nice. It's summer weather, but most places you're not thinking about the Winter Olympics today.
No. With respect to some of the other teams, we can still get to them. I think it's fair to ask about Canada. If Brad Marchand might not be among that first 6, who do you see? Like, who do you think could make sense for Team Canada's first 6? There's some obvious names, obviously.
Well, there's 4 absolute no-brainers that I don't even think you'd have to be really being dishonest to even say there's a debate about Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, and Cale Makar.
Yeah.
There's almost no point having a conversation. I don't think we need to explain to our very smart listeners why those players are definite picks for Team Canada. So then you go next on the list for me. If you look at the last year, the 6 players picked for the Four Nations in June, Braden Point was next. To me, he's still there. I think that Point, it's another 40 plus goal season. I thought he did what Canada wanted at the Four Nations tournament. Versatile player. I mean, essentially probably Canada's 3rd line center in an event like this, which is kind of crazy. But it speaks to, and plus you've got John Cooper on the bench. Like I just think there's no mystery he's going to be part of it. I don't see a reason if he was there a year ago to not include him. And then, so the 6th name last year was Brad Marchand. And, even though he's having this incredible moment in the playoffs and the Stanley Cup final, I really don't think he's going to be there. So when Canada makes its selections, expect 1 new player of the 6. And I think it's really down to Devon Toews, his Cale Makar's partner in Colorado. Again, I think very likely to be an Olympian. And then maybe Sam Reinhart. I could see Sam Reinhart. He scored 57 goals last season, was a huge part of Florida winning the Cup. Again, he might be mere minutes away from winning the Cup again, depending on what happens in the Stanley Cup final series with Florida had 3-2 as we're recording. I could see him being the 6th guy. Because look, Canada, it's funny. There's 2 ways of saying, I just finished the Sweden segment saying, isn't it interesting that Sweden left all these spots open on D because they're going to have hard choices there? Canada at forward, that's where the hardest choices tend to come. So, we'll see how things shake out, but I could see them making essentially 5 of the 6 choices be at forward once again. So yeah, probably put me down for Reinhart, but I think Devon Toews is very much in the mix there as well for possibility.
Yeah, both of those options make a ton of sense. And to your point about the forward group for Team Canada, how long until we start having the discussion about whether or not Macklin Celebrini is on this team among so many other potential pieces and considerations for Team Canada? That's definitely going to be something we're going to talk about on the show and will be talked the whole world over leading up to February.
Yeah, but it will be answered by his play, right? I don't think the debate isn't happening. The debate isn't is he going to be good enough one day? It's really, is he going to be ready in February 2026 to play in that level of competition? And I don't think we'll know. I mean, he's hasn't even played 80 NHL games yet, right? He's going to play another, let's hope he's healthy. He's going to play 30 odd more NHL games before this team is picked. And I think it's really a feather in his cap, the rookie season he had, that he went over to the World Championships. I know Canada obviously had a really crushing end of that tournament, losing to Denmark in the quarterfinals, but he really, seemed to find some chemistry with Sidney Crosby, which would be interesting. Maybe there's a different, I think you're going to see my guess, 4 to 5 different players on Canada's Olympic team than played at Four Nations. Like, I think that there's the potential for that much change. And the other thing too is teams get 2 extra roster spots for this tournament. It's a 25-man roster, so that's 14 forwards. Like, it's always possible Canada uses its 14th forward position on a younger player like Celebrini, which would mean you're not even really guaranteed to play necessarily, but you're there in case there's injury or performance issues or what have you. You're there break in case of emergency. So I definitely think he's got a shot, but the best part, if you're him, it's all about how he plays. Historically, though, Team Canada has not taken many teenagers to these events. Like, quite famously passed up on Stamkos in 2010. Pardon me. Passed up on Sidney Crosby in 2006. He was a rookie that year, but you might remember he was a well-regarded rookie who had 102 points that season. Now, they would have been making the call in December. But, Team Canada, generally speaking, has opted for, age over beauty a little bit. Like the sure thing over, the shiny new toy. I'm not picking on young players. It's just, you get into best on best tournament. First of all, the level of competition is insane. And if you make mistakes, that's how you lose the game. Like, you have to be sure that you have players that can make smart plays. You get to win a gold medal, you got to kind of win 3 game 7s in a row, quarterfinal, semifinal, gold medal game. And so I'm not here to say that Backlund Celebrini can't handle that, but he's less of a known quantity than, say, like Mark Scheifele, who for me will be very much in a conversation when it comes time. He didn't make the Four Nations team, but assuming he has a good start or it's his typical start in Winnipeg, like, I think he'll be in the mix for a lower down job for Canada. So anyway, I mean, look at this is going to be roster Christmas for the next few months for all the countries. And so that's kind of how I see it going for Celebrini. He's got a shot, but he's got to play well.
Oh, yeah. See, we've already started on that discussion. What about Team USA? I mean, I think just kind of similar to Canada, there's some probably obvious names who will make that list. Guys like Auston Matthews, Quinn Hughes, Connor Hellebuyck, one, if not both of the... Whoa.
No Hellebuyck. No chance.
No. Whoa. What do you mean no chance? You just won the Hart of Vezina.
Yeah, it's not a comment on his play, and certainly I would be shocked if he wasn't in Milan. But I think the top countries, generally speaking, don't want to name goaltenders. It's just too volatile of a position, too unpredictable. To say that, I think the 3 goalies, Ottinger, Swayman, and Hellebuyck, that were at the Four Nations are most likely to be USA's goalies, but I don't think any of their names will be called among the 6 done here. Same way Canada... You might argue Canada, Jordan Binnington's the guy now, right? He won the Four Nations, but I don't even see him as a key part of the conversation. Just, it's such a volatile position. Like, so much can go wrong. Like, why use one of these spots on a goalie? So, we've seen a few teams, like of the ones named. Finland put UC Saros on. The Latvians put 2 of their goalies on, but they're drawing from a less deep talent pool at the other positions. But Merzlikins and Silovs are going for them. So it's not like impossible. Lucas Nostel got named for the Czechs. But I don't see the top countries. I guess Finland is a top country, but beyond Finland, naming a goalie.
Interesting. Okay. But it's fascinating because it makes sense for Canada in their situation because, Jordan Binnington might be the guy, but their talent up in goaltending, not that great. Whereas for Team USA, they have an embarrassment of riches, which maybe could also work in a positive for them too.
Think about it this way. If you name Hellebuyck, just to have this conversation,
absolutely,
you're kind of saying he's our number 1. Like, you're not just naming him, you're saying he's our first goalie on the team. And then what happens if Swayman has a massive bounce back year? And then it's sort of like a story that this guy passed the guy who was number 1. Like, I think it's much easier with the goalie position. Just let it play out. So I'd be stunned. I mean, they haven't named their team, but if they named a goalie, that would shock me. I'll go that far.
I think you bring up an excellent point. So anyone else who, I think some of the other names I mentioned were a lot more obvious, but anyone else we should look out for Team USA?
Well, both Kachucks will be there. I mean, we saw at the Four Nations, they were a big part, and I don't just mean the fights, but like they were a big part of what USA Hockey is building. And they're obviously, look, they you might even argue if they didn't run into injury issues, like they could have won the Four Nations. They had 3 or 4 great chances in overtime in the championship game. So I think Matthew and Brady will both be there. Jack Eichel to me is on the team. Auston Matthews is on the team. Quinn Hughes is on the team. So, it's not a hard set of decisions, I don't think. And then I think Charlie McAvoy's on this team too. I mean, it's unfortunate he had to leave the Four Nations tournament. He got that infection after a shoulder injury. And I'm sure Team USA is thinking, if we could have Charlie McAvoy in that championship game, maybe that's enough to make the small differences you need. But I'm just saying, no one needs to apologize on the Canadian side. But I think he'll be their guy. So, I think their 6 is pretty set. And then you leave the goalies to the side, even though, as I mentioned, those 3 guys I think are almost for sure the players in net. But you don't have to make that call on June 16th. Give it another, 6 months, and then we'll see where we're at in December. And you go with your 3 best goalies then. And frankly, you make the call in December who the 3 goalies are. You don't have to say the number 1 is until February. So there's still a lot of runway on this process to play out.
Anything else we should discuss with some of the other teams' first 6? Finland, for example, Mikko Rantanen, Sebastian Aho, Barkov, Saros, Heiskanen, Lindell, all there. Germany's first 6 are up. Anyone else?
My comment there is Rantanen played with half the team this year on different teams. Right? he's got his Dallas Stars teammates there, but then he's also got Aho, who was briefly his teammate in Carolina. No, not a ton of surprises. The Czech team was kind of cool. The 6 guys they named were all part of their 2024 gold medal win in Prague at the Worlds. Dostal was just lights out in that tournament in net. He's obviously supplanted John Gibson as a starting goalie in Anaheim. But then you got Pasternak, Necas, Radko Gudas, good character player. But for him, getting named among the 6 is pretty neat. But I don't see a lot of controversy out there or anything with the picks. For me, it's just an opportunity to start getting your mind around what these teams will be. And, this summer, the teams are all doing orientation camps too. So, this is like the official kickoff to the return to the Olympics, which is, I've been banging this drum for too long, but I think it's just great for hockey.
CJ, we did this on our last episode where I had a list of guys and I asked you to tell me what you're hearing about them. I'd like to do that again. A much smaller list this time. First on my list, what are you hearing about Jonathan Toews?
Well, it's a huge week for Toews. I think, he can't officially sign a contract till July 1st. Unlike a lot of other players on the list, because he's not under contract to NHL teams right now, he can have those discussions. And I would think in some point here in the next few days, he's going to determine his landing spot. And it sounds like he's really narrowed the list in. And the Winnipeg Jets are still among the teams that have a shot at him. Would be quite a story, obviously, being a Winnipeg guy. I think for Toews, there's a huge element of the unknown here. Let's look at the positives. Physically and mentally, I think he's in a great place from what I've heard. And, we're having this time, and I know we've highlighted it, but I want to keep banging this drum as long as it's going. Mm-hmm. We're having the older guy rise in the NHL right now. Where a lot of veteran players are having their moment. And I just think there's a little hope to be found in all that Toews can come back, and it might take some time. Like, I think wherever he signs, it's not impossible. He's a 3rd-line center to start, and then, he's got to build his way through the team. But, he's going to, obviously the comeback is real. And, even as recently as a few months ago, I think there's some people just wondered if he'd be able to do it, if where he'd be at, but it sounds like he's feeling really good. So, Winnipeg and Colorado, I think, are the most likely potential landing spots for him. And I do think he's gonna get to the finish line on a decision, in the relatively near future. I don't know if that'll be communicated or not. We'll just have to see how it plays out. But he doesn't sign the contract officially till July 1st, but he's kind of one of the first free agents, unless someone re-signs somewhere in the meantime here, that's gonna pick their landing spot.
Teams like Winnipeg make a lot of sense for Jonathan Toews. Anyone else you're thinking?
Yeah, the Colorado Avalanche, I think, is in his wheelhouse potentially too. If you're Jonathan, it's about the fit. It's about coming back to a winning situation. which I think both of those teams offer him. The Jets, a little disappointment, obviously, naturally, with the way their season ended. But when you view it in the cold light of day, they won a President's Trophy and they got to Game 7 of the second round. I mean, it was a bumpy, rocky playoffs, a little up and down, especially for Connor Hellebuyck, who, won the Vezina and the Hart, as you mentioned earlier. But, I think that what an opportunity for a great story would be. First of all, much like Gabriel Landeskog, I think people are cheering for Toews to get back and have a chance to, a lot of athletes don't get to do this, but potentially have a chance to finish his career on his own terms, right? That it won't be determined by the illness that he has been dealing with. And, it's also, he's got a chance to write a bit of a Renaissance act. I mean, I don't know what to expect of him in terms of production or things like that after a couple of years away, but, he's a smart player. We're watching the playoffs right now. We're right down to the very end of it. Like he's a competitive guy. We know that. I think that there's tangibles and intangibles with him. And then the question will be just how does his body hold up and like when he jumps back into the rigors of it, and no one can know. Now, the beauty is at his age, he can sign a 1-year deal. He can sign a contract if he does that includes bonuses for games played and the like. That's beneficial to the team if he does that, because those bonuses are eligible to be pushed to the following season if that team wants him to do that. And so there's optionality, I suppose, in what he can do here. And so, I think in all likelihood, you're looking at him going to one of two spots, and, we'll see if he chooses Winnipeg. I think that'd be tremendous, but obviously he's got to figure out what's best for him, where the best fit is. And, he's going to try to win another Stanley Cup. And what a story would that would be. I mean, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but imagine a year or two from now, we're deep in the playoffs and he's, one of the probably a third liner on one of those teams, but he's got a chance to win the cup again. That would be quite something.
You're absolutely right on that. We go to Claude Giroux next. What are you hearing on him?
I think it's going to work in Ottawa, but, the closer, sometimes you need a deadline to push to make things work, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't have any reason to believe that Claude wants to leave Ottawa. But, this is a summer where if you're a free agent, I think there's a little more temptation, I want to call it, or there's really more belief that there could be, certain contracts out there. I mean, we're definitely going to see a few contracts in the July 1st period this year where people are like, what? And so I'm not saying that's going to be one given to Claude Giroux, but, if you're a free agent, you're wondering like, what's out there? And if we talk about hometown discounts all the time with lots of players, like what's the right discount, especially in a rising cap environment. But, at this point, I don't have any reason to believe that things have broken down to the point that he's going to leave or the team doesn't want him. But, we're in the stage where there's a little bit of a dance there in terms of finding the right number and making everyone comfortable. And, as I say, I don't want anyone, because this will probably apply to a few of the players you ask beyond this, to assume that means bad things. It's just, if you've ever negotiated anything yourself, sometimes you need to get to that do or die kind of, will I take this or will they offer that moment? And on June 16th, it doesn't exist. Like you can't manufacture that. I think you got to get a little closer to July 1st where, it works both ways. If you're the Senators, you're like, we love this player. Maybe we got to stretch a little farther, because if we don't get him, what are we going to spend that money on? And I think that they value a lot of what Giroux brings. I mean, you could speak to this because you're around the team all the time. They value a lot of what he does, both on the ice, off the ice, being sort of someone in the community that waves a flag, that really wants to be there, that chose Ottawa a few years ago before they were on the up and up. He chose to go to the Senators and has been there as the team has made the climb into the playoffs. So, sometimes you need that deadline to push negotiations along. And so, it's at hand here, but we're not at the moment of truth where, either side has to make a big decision. And I think that's basically where it stands today.
I wonder how much of it is money, how much of it is term with Claude Giroux. This is a guy who feels he has a lot left in the tank at the age of 37, and he did play particularly well for this Sens team. It's just that his numbers have been dipping every year he's been in Ottawa. Like 50 points at his age is pretty good. It's just he was a lot higher a few years earlier and obviously a little bit younger too. So I wonder how much of that is maybe Claude Giroux might want another year beyond one season, right? We've seen a lot of people suggest, hey, why don't the Senators give a 1-year deal with all these performance bonuses? What if Giroux doesn't want that deal?
I don't think he's in the territory where he needs to take that. You know what I mean? Now,
I get you.
You might do that if you're the player and you want to leave your options open. Like, okay, I'll give it one more year in Ottawa and see where I'm at. But by and large, players want security, and you can't blame them. There's a lot of unpredictability in the sport. So, I would be surprised if he took a 1-year deal. I'll put it that way.
For sure. The only other thing I'll say on Claude Giroux is, considering the comparables that are out there for players at his age and what players at his age have done in the past when they've gotten some of that money, I mean, Joe Pavelski is an example I've brought up over and over, and maybe he's a bit of an extreme example, but still an example nonetheless, considering what he was able to do at the age of 37. If I'm Claude Giroux, I don't see any reason why I need to take a deal that pays me a $3 million AAV, even if it is in the best interest of that team, particularly when I'm playing on a team where David Perron has $4 million. That's just my vantage point if I'm the player.
Well, of course. And I get that every fan probably wants players to take as little as possible because their mind is meaning that leaves more over for better, other players. But, I don't see it being a massive discount, nor should it be in his case. And, what else is Ottawa going to spend the money on? Like, there are other younger free agents, and I guess you could maybe have that debate, but then you're measuring how much of an influence do you see him on a good young team. My feel about the Senators and like talking to people around the league is that a lot of people see that team as like truly on the rise, that they got a lot of talent, that they probably need to like be a little more structured in their play, which I think comes with time and experience, like getting through a playoff series, seeing how that went for them, being close in a lot of games, but not, getting over the finish line against the Leafs in that first round. So I think you need some veteran stability around a team like that. And so that all goes into it. But you're right. There will be organizational risk that he gets older. I mean, your Pavelski example is like, that's the gold star in recent years of a player who was like really, really productive late into his career. He ended up doing, I believe, 1-year deals right at the end. He did a 3-year deal when he first went to Dallas. Mm-hmm. But then the problem is, if you look at it, that he's also a sort of a cautionary tale because he was amazing. And then, he fell off pretty hard. And then he retired. And so the Stars weren't left holding the bag there because he was doing a 1-year deal at that point. But the end for him came pretty swiftly. And, that's always got to be in your mind if you're signing a player that's in his late 30s or into his early 40s, is that guys do play to that age and play effectively. But sometimes, like, all of a sudden I don't want to say they can't play, but they go from being effective to being like ineffective in a blink of an eye. And so if you're giving out a 3-year deal, you're just worried, hey, we know we'll love next year. The second year, we're reasonably sure it's pretty good, but that third year is a huge what if. But I'll say this too. Teams always find a way with those, we'll call them problem contracts, players that can't perform. Teams usually find a way to either trade them away or, I'm not saying you want to get in that business, but it's kind of a misnomer to say like that a player has to be totally effective on every year of his deal. I think teams always find a way to bury those deals or trade them somewhere else, or, LTIR is a real thing though. Like, players are also very injured at the end of their career. So I don't know. I'm more of a live for today kind of guy, but I'm not getting paid to make those decisions, I guess.
Very fair. Appreciate the insight on Giroux and Toews to this point. Let's get to John Tavares.
So Tavares and the Leafs they've been going back and forth on his next deal. And, I think there's pretty positive feelings about that happening. What's interesting for Tavares is he's not in Claude Giroux's case yet. He's basically the contract before Claude Giroux, right? He's 33. Mm-hmm. He's coming off a 38-goal, 74-point season. We know that the decline for him is on the horizon, but I don't think it's arrived yet. Like, yeah, there's a decline from his best days as an NHL player, but he's still incredibly effective. And so, like, he's not taking there's all these fantasies out there I see on my Leafs Twitter feeds and stuff Like, he's not taking $5 million. It's just not happening. Not in a rising cap environment. What I think will be interesting is, do they find a deal like the Yanni Gourde deal in terms of structure? Now, Gourde took a lot less AAV, not at the same, stage or productivity levels as Tavares. But, Gourde signed a 6-year deal in Tampa. And I think something like a 6-year contract, which at least did with Chris Tanev, by the way, last year when he was a free agent, to take him to age 40. Like, if they get Tavares to like age 40 on that deal, I think that's a way to keep the AAV a little lower. You could maybe front load that contract so that he's getting more money in the first few years. I mean, they could also go the other way, at least while you're allowed to for now, put deferred money in the deal potentially to lower the AAV. But I think that there's ways to get creative to find the right number, but it's not going to be $5 million. He's not doing a 1-year deal. Like, I don't know what everyone's hopes are, because there's a lot of parallels here with him and Steven Stamkos for me. Like, Stamkos last year negotiated with Tampa right pretty much till the end, wanted to stay, as we know. But the price for him in Tampa was different than what he signed in Nashville. Like, he got 8.5 times 4, I believe, in Nashville. That was not what he was trying to get out of Tampa. I think it's the same scenario with Tavares. Like, he's willing to play ball to a certain degree with the Leafs and keep things modest. But if he goes to the open market, like, I don't think he's going to have any trouble getting $8 million, honestly. And I think he'll get some term on that number too. There's just so many teams that will value what he brings off the ice, what he still brings on the ice, and need help down the middle. Like, there's not a lot of centers on this market. Mm-hmm. And if the Leafs walk away from him, to me, they need 2 centers. And I just don't really see where they get them. They don't have a lot of trade chips. I'm sure they'd love to go out and, get like a Nazem Kadri or something like that. But I'm not sure how realistic that is. And so it's a long way of saying I think he's going to sign back in Toronto, but they're still working at getting to that place. And I wouldn't surprise me at all if he does that it's a longer term deal to lower the AAV. Keep in mind, someone told me this week, by the way, the salary cap that the league and the players projected was $113.5 million, I believe, for 3 years from now. Mm-hmm. Someone told me that's going to be low. That, like, in reality, as we get closer, it's going even higher than that. At least that's the expectation. And so, if you pay someone like John Tavares $6.5 million, even $7 million at this stage of his career, I know some people will be like, wow, that's a lot. But a $7 million player very quickly isn't going to be what it has been in the past. And so I think that's another way that you can find a mutual win is if you stretch it over all those years. I mean, there's no question about this. That's as committed of a professional hockey player as you can find in terms of, like, not leaving any stone unturned to squeeze whatever he can out of his ability, his preparation, all those things. And so you can't account for injuries and you don't know what's going to happen exactly. But, I suspect they get a deal done, and I think it's going to be a longer term contract rather than a short one.
Sorry, when you say that in the next how many years, next 3 years, it could go up to like 113 mil, and that could be low. Like that, you're saying it could be a higher projected number? I might have misunderstood that. I just want to make sure I get that right. Yeah,
exactly. So the league and the PAO might recall during the season put out like the next 3 seasons, what they project. But those are just projections. I mean, the number for next year is the number, because they have a lot of information that impacts that. But beyond that, those are just projections written in pencil. And the way you should do when you're doing budgeting in your life or whatever, like, you want to err on the side of caution. So they didn't put extreme projections out there. But I would say there's a strong confidence that the revenues of the league are going to be so well, essentially, that those numbers jump by a lot more than what's out there. And so maybe it's $118 million cap in 3 years. Maybe it's $120 million. I mean, it will all depend on the revenue and the growth of the league. But I will say this is a very bullish period right now in the NHL. As we've talked about, like, they're very close to getting the CBA done. I mean, I could see days at this point. And, there's a lot of harmony at that table. And both sides, I think, instead of fighting over in the past, they fought over, remember, at one point, the players got 57% of the pie and the owners got 43. Then it went to 50-50. And they were fighting over, how do we split up the pie? Well, now I think they're like, how do we grow the pie? Because we're in this together, and they're of a mindset that everybody can mutually win because they see a lot of opportunities for the business to grow. And so, this is a great time. I did also mention there, like, started to hear some of what's discussed at the bargaining table. I think the deferred money contracts, which have only briefly had their moment here, Sounds like they're going to go out the window. I don't think anyone wants that as an option. So I think that's going to be off the table. I've heard term limits on deals might be reduced by a year. And so instead of 8-year deals for your own free agents, the max would be 7 years. For free agents signing elsewhere, you go down to 6 years from 7. Which I think there's pros and cons to. Like, if you're a player in a rising cap environment, I mean, the appeal of a long-term contract will always be there because it's guaranteed money if something happens with your health, all those things. But I don't think it's necessarily bad if players start signing shorter-term deals, because if the cap keeps growing, then you're just going to be getting a bigger piece of the pie each time you come up. You're going to have the optionality to move to other teams in other situations. So that's something to keep a lookout for. This isn't a major CBA change, but there are these kind of tweaks that sounds like have been agreed upon. There's going to be some kind of mechanism to monitor like how the LTI situation works in the playoffs. Essentially, we'll call it a playoff salary cap so that teams can't take advantage of that the way that they have in the past. Anyway, I got way off course there. But,
but that was still really fascinating.
That's what I'm hearing.
I didn't even have CBA on my list. We don't even need to get into the conversation now unless you want to. But the idea of them looking into the LTI situation as it pertains to, how teams are in the playoffs with that, like that is a big thing for me with that in the upcoming CBA.
Well, I got to say, though, the reason that's become more of a thing, though, it's not just because everybody's cheating. Like, that's a simple way to look at it. It's because the cap hasn't been going up. So the best teams are always just trying to squeeze as many good players as they can under the cap. And they've found ways to kind of get creative, get in a little bit of the gray of that. But I think that this has become more predominant because the cap hasn't gone up. Well, guess what did I just say? The cap's not only going up, it's going up in a major way. Mm-hmm. And there'll be a downside to this. Like, I'm sure when we're doing this show 3 years from now, we're going to go like, holy crap, there's not that many cap teams. Like, what happened to all the cap teams? Because some teams, internally won't be able to spend to $120 million cap. But when we get to that world, there's less reason to be using like those mechanisms when building your team. And so in some ways, I think the problem is going to solve itself, but in another, for sure, decides, nothing's done until it's done, but it seems like there's agreement on something that's going to make it so that it's harder to do what a lot of teams have done here in recent years.
Okay. Very packed. What are we hearing? One more person on the list I have, and I didn't expect them to have their name here. Corey Perry. What are you hearing about him?
Well, it's interesting, right? 10 goals in the playoffs, 19 goals in the regular season. Like, he actually had a bounce back year. Not that he had a poor year. And some of that the year prior, but some of that, of course, is he plays on Connor McDavid's wing. He plays net front on the power play for this Oilers team. So he's got some unique opportunities to do what he does and score goals. But, he told me before the series started, point blank, like, I'm playing. He said in the relatively recent past, I'm playing. They're going to have to cut my skates off me. And so he's, point is like, he still has the hunger and the fire, which I think is really admirable, for a guy who's played over 1,500 total games in his NHL career between the playoffs and the regular season. And while I certainly think a reunion or a extended stay in Edmonton is possible, I just wonder if for him, he's had such an impact. He scored 3 goals in this cup final through 5 games. And as I mentioned, he's had pretty good numbers all year long. He only missed 1 game too. He's over 100 total games now at age 40 in this season. I just wonder if there's teams out there that are knocking on his door. I mean, he's not Brad Marchand in his career, but like, look what Brad's doing at age 37 for the Panthers. Wouldn't surprise me if Perry maybe gets to free agency. I mean, look, none of this is being hammered out. The only thing anyone in the Edmonton side is thinking right now is how do we win Game 6 to extend our season and get the cup final back home for Game 7. But he's a name to watch that I don't think it's impossible. Could hit the open market. It will obviously depend on where those talks go with the Oilers once the season's done.
We'll get to Game 6 in a moment, but I don't think it's going to get to a point with Corey Perry where he starts asking for Brad Marchand money, right?
No. I mean, pardon me, I've been on too many airplanes in the last 4 days, so
you got to get some rest.
Bit of that.
We'll get you some lozenges or something.
Tell me when to get rest. They drop the puck on these games at 8:30. I've got to do post-game work.
Yeah.
I got to fly at 8 a.m. Like, it's like 3 hours a night right now. Anyway, I mean, I'm having the time of my life. Don't get me wrong. But if you're wondering why my throat sounds as it does, it's like, this is exhausting. It's I don't know how the players do it. I say it every year, but I know how I feel right now. I feel like I've been through something, and I'm not in the games, blocking shots in my face and getting in physical altercations and all the things the players do. Anyway, I digress. Brad Marchand is making money every game. This guy, honestly, it's not a stretch to say, like, he's almost rewriting. It's a career renaissance is what it is. Like, most people have forgotten, this was his least productive regular season in a decade. He had those surgeries last summer I mentioned. He didn't train properly. It was a tough start in Boston. The Bruins' power play wasn't going well. Obviously, a place where he gets a lot of his cookies there. He wanted to stay with the Bruins. He didn't want to get traded at the deadline. He made a pitch right in the final days directly to management to stay there. Didn't work out for him. And it occurred to me the other night, you know how he scored those 2 goals in Game 5?
Yeah.
Where he kind of made something out of nothing a little bit. Like, he's just so fierce of competitor on the ice. He operates well in tight spaces and just can make plays. They're not like the highlight reel plays, but you watch them after, you're like, wow, like, that's just dogged determination. Like, I think he's made something out of nothing out of his season, personally. Like, he didn't want any part of this. And what does he do? Like, he gets traded. He's still injured when he gets traded to Florida. He actually stayed back in Boston when he first got traded and skated a little bit with Patrice Bergeron, his old line mate, longtime running mate, was among those skating at the skates, just helping him get back in shape. Comes to Florida. I think he just had a couple goals in the last 10 games of the regular season. No reason to expect them to pop. And then, it's really, as the playoffs have gotten further and further along, like, he is more important, I think, as a player for the Panthers. I mean, having 6 goals in the Stanley Cup final from your third line, from one player on your third line, is crazy. And Lundell also scored a goal in this series, so his line mate. I mean, that's, to me, there's a lot of differences, but the difference right now in this series with Edmonton is the Oilers just can't match that on a third. Like, they can't go as deep, right? And they're really hurt, obviously, with Zach Hyman not being in the series. It limits what they can do up front, but it just feels like at 5-on-5, the Oilers can't accomplish much unless Draisaitl and McDavid are playing together. And then when you play them together, the downside is you're really not getting a lot of offense from down the lineup. And then so they're relying on their power play, which has been kind of hit and miss. Help them get going on that comeback in Game 4, power play goal. But anyway, it's a long way of getting at Brad Marchand. Like, he took a year where it wasn't looking too good, and now he's turned it into gold, and he might turn it into silver in terms of getting another silver trophy in his hands. I think he's going to get Conn Smythe votes. I'd be surprised at this stage if he won it, although I wouldn't be, because there's at least one game left in the season. There might be 2. Like, if he has big moments in those games, it might be a case where you just can't deny him on your ballot. But beyond that, he's getting a 4-year contract. We've been all over this on the CJ show. I was saying 3 years before. It's going to be a 4-year deal, and it's going to be north of $8 million. Get ready for that. That's what he's getting. He is a DNA changer for a team. He has shown during this run that he can also play somewhere else and make a difference. And he's not just a product of being in Boston where everything worked a certain way for him, right? Like, he has fit in so well in Florida. And I think he's going to be pretty high. I haven't done an ex-free agent board, but he's up to like 2 or 3 on the board. I mean, really, Marner and Bennett are ahead of him. He's probably 3 at this point. That's how good his playoffs have been.
Okay, let's do a little role play here. You finish this podcast, someone walks into your hotel room and gives you a ballot for playoff MVP. Who gets votes? Who's your pick for playoff MVP right now?
Right now, it's Sam Bennett. 15 goals is hard to ignore. 13 of them on the road. It's a playoff MVP award for the whole playoffs. I feel like he's been consistently a difference maker for the Panthers during the run. And, the final counts obviously a little heavier, I would say, because those are the games that ultimately win the team the cup. But Sam Bennett has 5 goals in the final too, right? Like, I'm talking about Brad Marchand having 6. He's got 5. Like, to me, I don't see that big a drop off there. And so I think Bennett would be ahead, but I am willing to say it's not so locked in that I won't change that vote depending what happens in this next 1 or 2 games, depending what we have left. Like, I think it's close enough that there's still a potential for it to swing in Marchand's favor. Like, he's not scoring tap-ins in garbage time. Like, these are goals that he's manufacturing. He's straight up beating players. And I think 7 of his goals in this playoffs have been a goal that put Florida ahead. Mm-hmm. Like, he's scoring huge goals for this team. Obviously, the 2 overtime winners, the game 2 goal in double overtime in this series tied it up, bringing it back to Florida. Like, if Edmonton starts this series 2-0, I know you can always play this game. Like, that's a massive goal for the team. The other one he scored in overtime was against Toronto when Florida could have went down 3-0 in the second round, but he scored an overtime winner in game 3. I feel like he's got narrative, but he's also got numbers. And listen, I've been around the Panthers a lot during this playoffs. Basically a month of the playoffs, I've been there day to day around their team. Like, multiple players have said he's made that their best line. Now, some of that is matchup based, right? Because Barkov is taking the tougher matchups. Bennett gets, that's the benefit of having a 3-line deep team offensively. And Florida's 4th line's effective in its own way too. But, I think it's Bennett over Marchand, but I'm willing to change that vote before I actually have to make it, depending on what happens here in this last game or 2.
2 more questions from me before we get to ask CJ. If you're the Oilers, back against the wall for game 6, do you go back to Stuart Skinner in goal? Do you go to Calvin Pickard? What do you think they'll do?
Well, they're in a terrible spot. It's a no-win. Like, there's a win. The win could be whoever you pick wins the game. But there's no win from like a 10,000 feet view. I think you go to Stuart Skinner. He's been your number 1 goalie. I'm not saddling the loss on Saturday on Pickard, but he didn't do enough to keep the crease. But anytime you're flip-flopping like this and it's not related to health reasons, you're searching for something. Of more concern for me for the Oilers is their defensive play. Matthias Ekholm didn't play until the 3rd round this year. He had a tough night in game 5 of this series. He's 35 years old as well, coming off that injury. Like, I'm not placing this all at him. Like, Troy Stetcher's dressed for the last couple games, didn't play very much in game 4. Like, it just feels like Edmonton's running a little low on juice at this point. And I don't know if either goaltender you could count on to steal you a game. But I think at this point, you hope that Skinner will benefit. The travel has been punishing. I know no one wants to hear it, because if you're sitting at home, you want a game every other night. But I can tell you, like, I'm dying right now because of going all the way up to Edmonton and then all the way back in a 3-day span. But my point is that, Skinner was lifted after the first period of game 4. So while he had to endure that travel, he hasn't played the last 5 periods of this series, and 5.5 because the one game went to overtime. Like, I think you hope that maybe a little freshness from him, a reset, the work he's done with Dustin Schwartz, their goaltending coach. And also the beauty is, like, you can put your mind in a small place. Like, you get this close and you're like, Stuart, we literally need one good game. And then we'll worry about game 7 if we have it. We just need you to play one good game, one steady game. I think he can give them one individual game that's better than Calvin Pickard. And so that's ultimately why I think he's going to be the goaltender in game 6.
And last one for me before I ask CJ. Connor McDavid scoring his first goal of the final in game 5. He has been getting points otherwise, but the fact that it only takes him until game 5 for him to score his first goal of the final, very different compared to what we were seeing from him last postseason. What have been your impressions of how Connor's been able to play this Cup final?
Well, he scored on his 19th shot of the series. So if you look historically, that's what, a 5% shooting percentage? That's really low for any player, but especially one of the game's, greatest players. What I'm seeing from Connor McDavid, I'd like to see him be a little more selfish. And again, it's so easy for me. I'm sitting in a press box, having the press box pizza at the first intermission at Rogers Place. But I'd like to see him doing even a little bit what he did on that goal, like just driving to the net and shooting it himself. I think there's more goals out there for him. I know he's primarily a playmaker. He has the assist of the series, right?
Yes,
like that play where he's spinning through Barkov and Ekblad and then like gets like perfect pass over to Draisaitl right by Lundell's stick. Like that's like, I don't think to say he's not creating would be disingenuous of anybody. You know, as I say, I think the Oilers are suffering from not having enough beyond him and Draisaitl because both Draisaitl and McDavid have, you know, been pretty productive in this series. I think teams win a cup. We all love to talk about the superstars because that helps sell the game. But hockey is a team game. Like I've been around it long enough to say I think the teams that win tend to win because of their depth. It's not just, I mean, obviously it's because their stars do what they do, but I think McDavid's been good. Can we ask him to be superhuman and win a game? Maybe even Edmonton doesn't deserve to win because of what he does. I mean, that's why I'm going to show up on Tuesday excited just to see what he does. But I've been totally fine with his series. He's scoring, I think, in the Stanley Cup final. He's behind only Gretzky in points per game. And for any player that's played 10 Stanley Cup final games, like he's historically amazing. I understand the inclination to want him to be even more historically amazing. But I don't know that he can do it on his own, unfortunately. And I hope he can go into that next game with even more of a shooter's mentality. I'd love to see him use that speed, but just don't look for a pass when you get into the home plate area. I don't think there's a bad shot for him. I know Bobrovsky's a great goalie. He's let in maybe a couple of the goals in this series I would put on him, but not too many. I mean, he had the Arvidsson one in game one, kind of squeaked through him. Nurse, he was off his angle there when Nurse scored the second goal in game four. But like, Bobrovsky is solid. So I understand you're trying to set up a perfect play. You're trying to get the goalie moving, all those things. I think the Oilers got to be, I saw a message on their whiteboard in the visiting room after game four. It said simple, direct. I think they got to be simple and direct. Take the puck to the net, shoot it, you know, have numbers there, try to get on rebounds, try to win battles in front. But McDavid, he gets no criticism from me. I think he's doing absolutely everything you could ask of him. Played 26 minutes, I think, the other night. Like he has emptied the tank and then some for this team, and it just might not be enough. Like I hate to say that for anyone who's cheering for the Oilers that's listening to this pod, but I think the loss of Hyman can't be overstated. He had 16 playoff goals last year for the Oilers, Zach Hyman. I mean, they need a couple more goals, and I don't know if we should be totally expecting them all to come from 97 or 29. But at the same time, what does every player say? If you told me at the start of the year we'd get a game 6 on the road, 3-2 in the playoffs with a chance to set up a game 7 at home in the Cup final, we'd take it. Connor McDavid would take this. And we'll see what he can do with it and what his teammates can do with it.
Looking forward to game 6 and your coverage of that for The Athletic. Let's get to Ask CJ. Let's get to your questions, dear listener or watcher, if you're watching this on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions over X, Blue Sky, or Discord. Let's start with this one from West Point Lendo. Could the Toronto Maple Leafs be in on Nik Ehlers to replace Mitch Marner if he leaves?
I'd be surprised. You know, I think what the Leafs are looking for, you know, Nik Ehlers is a great player. First of all, he's not going to come at a cheap price because he'll be in demand. And, you know, when the Leafs, Brad Treliving's talking about a DNA change, he's talking about not a smaller skilled player like Ehlers, I don't think. And obviously, I understand the question because you're like, how do the Leafs replace 100 points for Mitch Marner? I think you count on growth from Nyes, you count on a bounce back season from Matthews, and then you add players who can get the job done, but won't probably be individually 100-point guys. There's just not many of those players out there. So I would be very, very surprised if Ehlers was on the radar for the Leafs, but we'll see. 2 weeks.
Varsity GS says, now that Marner's gone, we don't know that yet, but anyway, is there a larger risk of Auston Matthews not re-signing when his contract expires?
I don't think it's a larger risk. I think the risk was always there with a player like Matthews is that he just wants to feel he has a chance to win. And so Marner leaving, as close as those guys are, I don't think it changes. It doesn't make Matthews be like, oh, my buddy's gone, now I'm gone. I think it's more, can they use the cap space? Can they find ways to, you know, build a team that has a better chance to win? And if that happens, I mean, Auston Matthews has a chance to go down as the greatest Maple Leaf ever. I mean, frankly, Mitch Marner has that chance too. It just seems that he's going to walk out the door. So Auston Matthews is not far off passing Matt Sundin for the all-time goals mark for the Leafs. He'll now be in a position to get the all-time points mark with Marner going. I'm not saying he's in it for those types of things, but I don't think he would not leave Toronto lightly. It would probably only be if the Leafs got to a spot where they're kind of rebuilding and they don't have a chance to win with him. Because at the end of the day, Matthews has not played enough big playoff games for his liking. So, it changes the dynamic, it changes the team, but I think that dynamic needs to change. Already. And so this will be Marner's choice to leave. It wasn't the Leafs pushing him out, but it might be the best thing for all parties involved, including Auston Matthews.
Okay. Insider J Money wants to know, which team are you excited to see what they do this offseason, but isn't being talked about much?
Oh, man, I don't even know. I can't keep track of what's being talked about.
I feel like Insider J Money was fishing for you to say the Philadelphia Flyers. That is their team, of course. But I'm also projecting.
I guess. I don't know where the Flyers are. They're not right there yet, right? Like, I'm curious to see what Carolina does. That's a team that's had all kinds of success and, but is looking for the ultimate success. As we know, they're in the market for impact players. They have a very creative front office. Like, that's a team that intrigues me because I don't know what they're going to do, but I think it'll be interesting. Fascinated to see what Chicago does. I think low key, what is being missed naturally, I'm not saying it's being missed in the market, is they can't be bad anymore. Like, they really, they're in the third year of Bedard's entering the third year of his entry-level contract. He can sign an extension, obviously, as of July 1st. And they've been nowhere close to being nowhere close. So, like, what are they going to do with their cap space? How do they attack this free agent and trading period? Vancouver is kind of intriguing. Look, I could make a case for probably 15 teams if I went down the list. Mm-hmm. What does Ken Holland do in LA? He's taken over a team there that's kind of come up against the Oilers' brick wall 4 years in a row. He's a new GM in that market. I think he has the ability maybe to make a more gutsy trade than Rob Blake might have, not because Rob Blake, but he's less tied to the players that he's taken over on the roster. And so, I could see a shakeup being there. I could see them being in on free agents because it's an attractive place to play. There's all sorts of, what are the Rangers doing, man? That's the rain. Like that'll be interesting. What does Florida do after another late cup run where they don't have much time? They've got, three of the top free agents on the board in Bennett, Ekblad, and Marchand. There's certainly not room, I don't think, to keep all three, but how do they navigate that? This is the best time of year because there's storylines in every market. How do the Canadians address their second line center position? Doesn't necessarily look like that player is out there in free agency. Maybe I'm wrong. But is there some kind of trade that can come together? There's a lot of teams that we're going to be really diving deep on once we get on the other side of this cup final and get into free agency and then the period afterwards.
The Fighting Mongoose wants to know if the Buffalo Sabres will be parts of those exciting teams you've mentioned. Specifically, they want to know if they'll be doing anything this offseason or will they just run it back with maybe one new guy?
Hard to say. They've beefed up the front office a bit there. So again, there's new views coming in with Jarmo Kekalainen, coming on board. Look, there's JJ Peterka's name is out there pretty prominently in trade talks. He's an RFA that needs to get signed by Buffalo. Alex Tuch is entering the final year of his contract. Bo Byram needs a new deal and I think would be a pretty attractive trade piece. So I think that the ingredients are there for a pretty interesting stew in Buffalo and no team is under more pressure. I can say that. There's pressure all over this league, but no team is under more pressure to actually make the playoffs again after, people are like growing up, getting married, buying a house, and they've never seen a Sabres playoff game in that market. The way it's going, it's sad. But that's also the reality of a league where only half the teams are making the playoffs, hence why we should expand the playoffs, but that's a conversation for another day.
Okay. All right.
I would say this. We know that Gary Bettman doesn't want that. There are all kinds of people. I've had so many discussions in the last 6 weeks, with people at the team level, with people at the league level. I can't imagine the Players Association would be against it. More players in the, it's going to happen. I mean, the league's going to expand even more. It's probably just going to take a change at the top of the NHL because Gary Bettman couldn't be more clear about how he feels about it.
Give me a play-in, for the love of God. Give me a play-in. MLB has it. It works. Give me a play-in. Anyway, I'm right there with you with that conversation. The only other thing I wanted to add is that the idea of JJ Peterka being out in trade talk for me is just like, why? Also notable, not among
he doesn't want to be there.
Fine, but like still just.
What do you mean fine? I mean, that's.
No, no, you're right. Like, it's not the right reaction.
The team controls his rights.
Absolutely.
The team controls his rights, so he can only do so much. I mean, he can try to get an offer sheet, but Buffalo has more than enough space to match.
Yes.
And so, I don't think it's not a case that the Sabres don't want him. Kevin Adams couldn't be more clear. Like, he addressed this at the trade deadline with the reporters in the market, said that they see him being part of like their core moving forward. Like, they love the player, but I think the player wouldn't mind a change of scenery.
Yeah. For me, it's more just like, wow, like just again, another player in Buffalo with talent who's going to want out, who's going to want to play for somewhere new, and is more than likely going to produce well for that other market. Just so much bleeding from Buffalo. Like, when does it end? Like, I feel more bad off of that and less of like, oh man, it's ridiculous that he's even mentioned in trade talks. Anyway, I digress.
Well, one place it ends is when you build up an organization that people want to be part of, right? Like that. That's on the organization and it's on the ownership there. And there's just a feeling in Buffalo that I think that the front office hasn't been adequately staffed. Like, at least they're finally doing it now. But I think that they need more. They need more support at every level of the organization. And, it's not easy, obviously, but they still have a lot of good players there. Like, I still think that there's a window for them to become what they want to do, but they got to get it right this summer.
Absolutely. And with that, that's going to do it for Ask CJ, and that's going to do it for CJ Show. I think we've done enough damage for one Monday morning. A very packed show, I might add. You were very great as usual.
Thanks, buddy. Now I got to go to practice.
Yeah.
We're talking about practice.
Not the game. Practice. We'll be back.
You know what? It didn't even occur to me. These might be the last two practices of the season I cover if the series ends on Tuesday.
That's true. And then you get to go home and rest. Or you get a game 7 on Friday.
And there's no rest on the other side of the series, whichever way it ends, because then we were into trades and free agency and everything. But anyway, this is the best time of year. Like, I'm excited. I'm just feeling a little under the weather. So
it's okay.
If my energy levels were off, that's all it is.
No,
you're worn down a little bit.
Trust me, your energy levels were very up today. And thank God they were, or else we would have had a whole podcast where we would have just said Mason Raymond 30 times. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We'll be back later this week with a brand new episode of The CJ Show. Bye, guys.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.